So today's video is a training on how to conduct the confidence building presentation. So first thing that we go over are our goals and objectives for the day. So as a facilitator, you need to make sure that you go through these goals. It gives students a good idea of what the rest of the day is looking like, what the rest of the day is going to look like, as well as the skills that we hope students walk away with. So go through these objectives with them before transitioning into the topic of confidence building. So before we can talk in depth about building confidence, we have to understand what confidence is. So ask the class, what is confidence? Have them try to define it. Confidence is our sense of our ability to rely on someone or something or accomplish tasks. Okay, but today we're going to focus on the confidence that we have in ourselves because that's one piece of confidence that we can control. But the purpose of this slide is simply defining confidence for them. Another really important thing to mention is why we are here as a CAPSA educator talking about confidence building. So the point of this slide, we want to draw the lines between the relationships of confidence, healthy relationships, and violence prevention. So you can ask them, I'm here to promote healthy relationships and prevent abusive relationships. So how do you think confidence factors into that? Listen to their responses. But some good things to mention is that confidence, when we feel confident in ourselves, we know we deserve to be treated with respect and nonviolence, right? So it's a protective factor for experiencing violence because when we see warning signs, red flags in a relationship, we have more confidence in our ability to go, that's not okay, I deserve better than that, and maybe seek a way out of that situation. Let's see, when we're confident in ourselves, we can also be confident in others, that we can rely on them, that we can trust them, right? And how this relates to violence prevention, okay? So when we have confidence in ourselves, confidence is actually a protective factor to both experiencing and perpetrating violence. So that's really the main point of this slide, is getting them to see how all of these things are connected and that confidence is a protective factor. Because when I feel confident and secure in myself, I less feel the need to attempt to control another person in order to make myself feel better or more secure. So that's in essence how confidence is a protective factor. So now we're going to dive a little bit deeper into understanding confidence. So we're going to ask a couple questions in order to help us understand confidence a little bit deeper. So our first question is, what does confidence sound like? So ask the class, what does confidence sound like? They're usually pretty good with this section. They'll say, I can do it, or I'm so awesome, right? But overall, what we want to get across here is that confidence sounds positive, right? Pretty basic. Too often we may lack confidence because of the way that we talk to and treat ourselves. So that's the message here. Confidence sounds positive. Our second question is, where can you get confidence from, right? Where does it come from? Allow students to answer these questions and they'll come up with some answers that might be external factors that might give us boosts of confidence, but the purpose of this slide is to get students to recognize that we have to create our own confidence, right? In order to have true, long-lasting confidence, we have to create it ourselves and it has to come from within, all right? And then our third question, that out of these three questions we will focus the most on today, is how we can use our confidence. So ask the students, how can we use our confidence for good? And have them answer, but some things that you should point out here is that we can be better upstanders, right? When we have more confidence in our ability to help others, we'll be more willing to step in and help others, so we can be better upstanders. We can have healthier relationships with ourselves and with others. And we can also use it to spread positivity and help boost others up, okay? And so we really want students to understand that we can actively use our confidence for good. So now we're going to move into understanding the difference between confidence and self-esteem, because self-esteem is something that plays a huge role in confidence, so it's worth talking about. So ask the class, what is self-esteem? And you'll get lots of good answers. Usually they hit the nail right on the head. Self-esteem is overall our feelings about ourselves, how we feel about ourselves overall. And the next question then would be, how does confidence and self-esteem relate? Like, what's the relationship between those two things, right? So when you're explaining this concept to students, we use this analogy of confidence is like a car and self-esteem is like the gas to the car, right? In order for the car to be able to move, accomplish tasks, do the things that we need to do, it needs to have gas, right? Same thing with confidence and self-esteem. In order for us to feel confident in our abilities to rely on others or accomplish tasks, we have to have a healthy level of self-esteem in order to power us through. Another important thing to mention here is that we're not trying to get the students to focus on having full self-esteem all the time, okay? Because self-esteem kind of ebbs and flows, right? Some days will be better than others, and it's okay if we have a bad day or two. We just need to know how to build ourselves up. Because the problem comes when we get stuck on lower empty, right? If we get stuck on zero self-esteem, then that can be really harmful for us as people. So take this moment to ask students, if we get stuck on lower empty, what might that look like for us? Allow them to answer, but some things that you should point out are, it might look like increased feelings of loneliness, or low self-worth, or feelings of depression, or maybe even thoughts of self-harm or suicide. Okay, and remember here that this is a topic of conversation where it's important that we've set up a trauma-informed classroom at the beginning. So keep an eye out for students who look like they might be in distress, and see if you can chat with them after class, or if a teacher can chat with them during class. But that's the reality, so it's important to talk about how getting stuck on low or empty can seriously affect our physical and mental health. So another thing that's really important to mention here is the difference between feelings of depression versus a clinical diagnosis of depression or some other mental illness that makes it difficult for people to have high levels of self-esteem or confidence, okay? Because the next thing that we're going to talk about are tips to improve our self-esteem. But if somebody has mental illness or a clinical diagnosis of depression that is making it difficult for them to build their self-esteem or confidence up, then sometimes they can try all of those tips for improving self-esteem and they don't work. So it's important to affirm this in the students and tell them that, yeah, this is a reality and it's totally okay and sometimes necessary for you to seek outside professional help in order to improve your overall well-being. Okay, so that's a really important thing to mention here because it is the reality, and we will interact with a lot of students who have depression or mental illness that make this a little bit difficult for them. So it's important to mention there. So now we're kind of rewinding a little bit, because as we talked about, we want to make sure we don't get stuck on lower empty. So we simply need to find a way to fill back up. So here, this slide is talking about tips to improving self-esteem. I'm not going to go through everything that's on this PowerPoint because you can see it in the PowerPoint and you can find more information in the outline for this presentation. But what you want to mention here is acknowledging that people are different and that what works for one person might not work for another. So encourage the students to practice these skills to improving self-esteem and find what works for them, because ultimately that's what's going to be most useful for them over the long haul, right? We want people to find out what works to help them feel better about themselves, okay? So make sure you mention that here and then go over this list with the students and allow them to brainstorm other tips for improving self-esteem. All right. But another thing to mention is that we are going to practice some of these skills for improving self-esteem as a group. Okay, so we have 2 activities that will help us practice a couple of these skills. And they're ones that are a little bit more popular, but also are a little bit more skills-based. So helping the class, doing them with the class can help them see how they might actually benefit them in improving their feelings of self-worth and confidence. Okay, so our first activity is practicing positive self-talk. Now, everybody has heard of positive self-talk before. The students will tell you that they've heard of it before and they know what it is, which could be true, right? But I think something important for us as facilitators to know is why positive self-talk works. And now this is a theory that you don't necessarily need to explain to students in much depth, but it's helpful to briefly explain it because it shows how positive self-talk actually works for us, and also good information for you as a facilitator to have in case you get any questions. Okay, so we're going to explain how positive self-talk works through understanding the cognitive behavior therapy model. And simply, what that model says is that our thoughts or our perceptions of situations influence how we feel, and our feelings influence how we behave. Okay, so it's just showing the relationship between our thoughts have a direct impact on our feelings, and our feelings have a direct impact on how we behave. And that's how we're going to explain how positive self-talk works. So here's a chance where we can go over an example with the students to show them what we mean and how it works. So we're going to take this example with Jane, who's struggling in her math class. Okay, and go through this example with students and have them read the thoughts. So Jane's thoughts is, "I'll never understand this, I'm so stupid." Well, ask the students, okay, if this is Jane's thought, how might she feel? Allow them to respond. Some responses you get are she might feel defeated, hopeless, and stupid. So how do you think she's going to behave if those are the feelings that she's experiencing? Probably not great, right? Jane might decide to just not study and fail her math class. And then that behavior of her choosing not to study and failing her math class might affirm her negative thoughts of, "I can't do this, I'm so stupid," right? So this is a good example of how these negative thought patterns influence our feelings and our behaviors. So our next part of this activity is to ask the class, how could Jane be more positive? Because that's what this is about. Changing our thoughts will change how we feel and how we choose to react to situations. So ask them, how could Jane be more neutral or even positive? And go over this relationship with them. If Jane says, "This is tough, but I can do tough things if I choose to work hard," she might feel more challenged, she might feel more determined, she might feel more hopeful, and that will influence her behavior. And maybe she asks for help, studies hard, and just does the best that she can. Okay, so this is our example of how positive self-talk works, and really just our example that's setting us up for the activity that your students will participate in. So for this activity, just have students get out a piece of paper and split it into, and on one side of the paper to write down negative or unhelpful thoughts that they have about themselves. And then on the other side of the paper, have them brainstorm positive or neutral things that they could try saying instead. Okay? So this activity allows students to sit down and be critical about what negative thoughts they have in their brain and actively think of more neutral or positive thoughts that they could substitute instead. Okay? Because even a neutral thought is better than a negative thought, right? So for this one, you need to be prepared for students to struggle with this activity, because you will have students who, even after you give them however much time you feel is appropriate based on the size of the class or how much time you have left for the rest of class, even with the 3 to 5 minutes that you might give them to think about the left and right side and come up with better positive things that they could say, you will have students who say that they can't think of anything. Okay, you will have some students who say, "I can't think of anything good that I would say about myself." So, a couple options. You could have some sayings prepared, right? you could have some things in your mind prepared that you could help them along with. And the next slide is actually a full page of examples of things that you can say instead in response to some common negative thinking patterns. But another really great opportunity in this moment is to turn it to their classroom. If you feel like the class dynamics are safe, then this can be a really supportive, positive moment for their peers to interact with them. So you could say, all right, Jane is having a tough time figuring out something that she could say that's more neutral or positive instead of this negative thing that she's saying. What would you guys suggest? And then you can take that moment to brainstorm and to think with the students about a solution that they could help Jane come to, and that will be a really positive moment for a student who's maybe struggling with their self-esteem. But it is something to keep in mind that you will have students who can't think of anything, so make sure you have some responses prepared or turn it to the group to help. Okay, so this next slide, like I mentioned, is different negative and unhelpful thoughts, and then what people could say instead, just as examples, to give the students more examples, or if you need somewhere to pull from. So that's the end of the first activity. The other activity that you could use is practice celebrating the small stuff. So this is practicing positivity through a gratitude journal. And again, the focus of this is to change people's negative thoughts or focus on negativity to be a little bit more positive and recognize that there are a lot of positive things that happen throughout the day. So this one's really simple. Ask the students to write down 3 things that they're grateful for today. And as with any activity that you have students participate in, it's a good idea that you've done it before so that you can show them your sheet, right? Or whatever it is, you can show them, well, if you need ideas, here are the 3 things that I wrote down that I'm grateful for today. And encourage students to try this every day and try and think of something new every day, okay? This helps them think of the little things, the positive things in life that overall make you feel better. And that's also a good thing to recognize here, is that these don't have to be giant grand gestures that somebody's done for them. These can be, really kind of small, seemingly insignificant things that they're grateful for today, and that's totally great. That's exactly the point of this, getting people to recognize positivity, okay? And that's the end of those 2 activities. So before class or based on class dynamics, you can choose whether you want to do one of them or time permitting 2, but you should at least be completing one of those activities with your class. So as we're wrapping up this discussion, we want to come back to, those are things that they can do for themselves in order to increase confidence, right? So how can they use their confidence for good? We're revisiting this question again. They might have a little bit more insight and a little bit more information that they want to share at this point in the conversation. So ask them, how can you use your confidence for good? And again, what we want to focus on here is uplifting others, taking care of ourselves, having healthier relationships, and being better upstanders. Those are all great ways that students can continue to use their confidence for good. And it's a really important thing that they recognize not only what having high levels of confidence can do for them, but also how they can use it to help other people. I think that's a really empowering thing. And especially at this age, a lot of times youth they think a lot about other people and sometimes not as much about themselves. So getting them to see how this can be a good thing for the people that they care about can be really positive. And so as we're concluding this, we're coming to this question of, what does confidence look like? And they will catch on. We ask them what confidence looks like, and they'll say, me, it looks like me, right? But ultimately, what the point you want to get across here is that when you feel confident, when you feel good about yourself, you look confident. And really, that's the goal. That's what we want. We want people to feel confident in themselves, because that internal feeling is really what matters.